shall we start with President Trump?
And the F-bomb.
Wow.
The F-bomb and the F-bombers, yes.
They don't know what they're doing, apparently.
No. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It just wasn't. He knew exactly what he was saying. And it's resonating worldwide. Did anybody ever hear a President of the United States talk to the press?
Should we just remind our viewers, and don't worry, we have...
bleep, bleep.
Bleeped it out.
Yes.
Were you pleased he was standing up to Israel, Kevin?
Not necessarily. Well, the bombs I'm more interested in or concerned about are the ones dropped in Gaza or on Israel and in Iran or Lebanon recently. But it betrayed two things. One is, I do believe Netanyahu's called the shots in here and he's had to follow and he's not been in control the way he thought. He got excited when Netanyahu, Israel started attacking Iran. But they basically had the American say-so, but they were calling the shots. And then secondly, this is his big moment. He thought, the peacemaker, I've achieved peace here. Achieved peace by dropping bombs, it's got to be said, in Iran, backing one side, claiming he totally obliterated the Iranian programme when, in fact, leaked documents suggest initial US intelligence assessments are no. It might only be the programme might be put back weeks or months. So you can see why he's under a lot of pressure, because he wants to go around the world looking as if he's the most powerful, cleverest peacemaker ever. Isn't that the case?
It seems to me what's fascinating with him is there is nothing you can do to annoy Donald Trump more than not stick on his narrative. He has a story he wants to tell, and if you have changed the facts so his story isn't right, he's furious. Yeah,
and of course he was going into this extraordinary herogram from the NATO General Secretary. Most extraordinary one I can ever see about from one leader to another world leader. So he was expecting to be garlanded with praise.
Yeah, so this is the head of NATO.
Yeah.
Who texted privately, he thought...
Funny that.
The American president for his extraordinary intervention in bombing Iran. The text message has been described as fawning, and you can make your own assessment because President Trump decided to publish it. The message said, Mr. President, dear Donald... Congratulations and thank you for your decisive action in Iran. That was truly extraordinary and something no one else dared to do. It makes us all safer. You are flying into another big success in The Hague. It was not easy, but we've got them all signed on to 5%. Donald, you have driven us to a really, really important moment. You will achieve something no American president in decades could get done. Europe is going to pay in a big, capital letters, way. He's sort of fallen into the president's vernacular, hasn't he?
He could have written it himself.
Yes.
I almost thought it was parody when I heard it and read it. I thought, Trump's writing his own herograms now.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's the entire talk of the NATO summit, every leader there, about 32 of them there, all talking about how utterly inappropriate it was to swell the president's head even further.
It's like the messages Kevin sends you after a morning broadcast.
Of course.
Of course.
You read that Mark message and you think he's taken the... He's having a laugh.
He didn't even say bigly, did he?
Yeah, no, he's having a laugh and you might fall for this, because it's really embarrassing. I mean, it is absolutely embarrassing, because I think the assessment is wrong anyway. And there's a reason other US presidents didn't bomb Iran, because they thought it would be counterproductive.
Well, and also now we know from this leaked intelligence it wasn't decisive action in Iran. As you say, it looks like... I mean, firstly, the nuclear capabilities were not obliterated. That's been downgraded anyway.
They may have got the enriched uranium out first.
And it's only delayed it by a couple of months. That doesn't feel decisive at all.
And coming back, both US intelligence and the International Atomic Energy Agency, I think it is, both said there was no evidence they were developing a nuclear bomb.
Except the level of enrichment we know is only...
60.
That's not civil... energy use,
but it's not 90. But there's not the 90s you would need for a weapon either. And you can see it as a negotiating.
But nobody else enriches to 60% without heading towards nuclear weapons.
You could see it as a negotiating tactic because they're desperate to get economic sanctions lifted, not just by the US, but the US has forced countries in the UK and Europe to impose sanctions.
It was a threat. So, I mean, you know. And within that language, you could say there was a threat of nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I think it's implicit in it.
Did Trump's F-bomb work? Because it does seem There's now a ceasefire.
We're back on.
We're back
ceasefire.
on. And there was a phone call we gather afterwards with Netanyahu, which was described as, was it testy or meaty? So that was obviously... I imagine there were a few more F-bombs.
This is about the man-toddler in the White House, isn't it? I mean, that's what it's not really about.
But if
peace
it stopped,
and progress.
But we go back to the circularity of it has to fit his narrative. And his narrative is, we've done the job so it can stop. Now, what you have is you have a leak that says, regardless of whether you think the job should have been done or not, the job hasn't been done. Therefore, if the idea is you have to get rid of Iran's nuclear capability, the job hasn't been done and it shouldn't have stopped. So that's the whole problem. It all goes back to, if it doesn't fit Trump's narrative, even if the facts don't fit, policy being made based on the narrative rather than the underlying facts.
As William Hague, the Conservative former Foreign Secretary, said, there'll be people in Iran now in that regime who'll say we have to accelerate the programme. The only way you will stop the bomb is to get negotiations and talks and get the agreement. There was the agreement that Trump broke in his first presidency. You have to get it back. Britain, France, Germany were in talks. They got blown up. Got to try and get them back on track.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we have our national security strategy. For the first time in many years, we have to, the government tells us, actively prepare for the possibility of the UK homeland coming under direct threat, potentially in a wartime scenario. The years ahead will test the UK. The direction it takes, the decisions we take will reverberate through the decades. And we're going to get these fighter jets with nuclear capability.
Yeah, so, hang on. So Iran has been bombed to stop it acquiring nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons, it says, it isn't acquiring. And we're going to proliferate and get more. Isn't there something of a contradiction in that, right? We might say, let's not go for moral equivalent. We will behave responsibly.
Yes.
But I don't see we're going to help rid the world of nuclear weapons by getting more.
But if hostile states are getting nuclear weapons, we need to defend ourselves against that scenario. And if those nuclear weapons are not obliterated, then we definitely need to arm ourselves.
If Iran is getting nuclear weapons, you can go down that argument. We are told that Trident, son of Trident, which is going to cost something like £200 billion over 30 years, was the Rolls-Royce nuclear deterrent. That's all you needed. And now we're being told that's not the case.
Yeah, but warfare changes, doesn't it?
Right.
And don't you want to be as prepared as possible and as deterrent as possible?
I don't want to waste money on weapons of mass destruction that I think are immoral, and you could never use without extinguishing most life in Britain.
You do not believe in the deterrence principle. I mean, that's the concept. And it's not to... It is to deter anything happening to the UK. That's the point. Do you not think that is correct?
And it's called MAD, mutually assured destruction, and it was all based on the fact that because you can create such mayhem and such loss of life, it will never get used. I think it's a really risky strategy. Most countries in the world don't have nuclear weapons. There's only 9 that do, including us and Israel and the US. The other 180 or so get along well. Germany doesn't have them. Spain doesn't have them. Italy doesn't have them.
They're part of the military group NATO that does have them with a pact that says they would be defended.
NATO's the biggest collection of nuclear weapons in the members.
Weapons, we should make sure they're modern, fully capable and up to date.
How are we going to pay for it, do you think?
Very
we had the Dame Priti Patel on yesterday, of course, saying it's all pie in the sky because the government hasn't said how they will pay for this. So are taxes going to rise?
She committed herself to it at the same time, but that's how she would pay
And we've
it.
got this nonsense that Starmer's going to tell the NATO summit we'll be spending 5% of our GDP by 2035. Anybody can say that because
do you think that
he will not be Prime Minister by 2035.
Taxes are going to have to go
Of course they will.
Aren't they?
Yes.
To pay for this increase in defence
they're
spending?
going to have to cut public spending deeply, and we see that now there's now over 120 Labour MPs opposing cuts of £5 billion. The welfare budget's going to go up by a lot more than that.
Well, you can buy them on HP, hire purchase, and borrow for them. But no, you'll either put up taxes or you'll cut other services.
Meanwhile,
you want a hospital or a bomb?
The Chancellor, who's in charge of all these decisions, has told those Labour MPs that if they get behind this amendment, which would wreck their welfare cuts, it's going to devastate the government. She's trying to see off this rebellion. The defeat would damage Sir Keir Starmer's authority.
It would.
To such an extent, it would effectively become a confidence vote in the government.
So they're raising the stakes now, saying if you go down this way, if you defeat us on this...
the Prime Minister loses credibility and
completely.
the government becomes weaker.
Well, there could then be a confidence vote tabled the next day, which they would win, because they've got a majority of 170.
But weakens his
massively,
authority.
It's absolutely
One minister
massively.
apparently described the mood in government right now as one of panic.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
They're only a year in.
Yeah. The first anniversary is next week. What a happy anniversary that's going to be.
It's another own goal. It's a self-inflicted
he
wound.
Will this debate happen next Tuesday? Would you think it'll happen next Tuesday, or do you think it'll be delayed?
I think there's a chance it'll be delayed.
Well,
they're scrambling around, they're looking at the vote. It depends what the Conservatives may not side with the rebels.
I think they will.
If they don't side with the rebels, it sometimes can mean you'll get more Labour rebels because it's a kind of free hit. They know the government will survive. But he can win the vote, and his credibility is damaged already because you've seen that so many of his own side think he's making the wrong
This
choice.
winter fuel, they were very, very strange flags you wanted to raise as a Labour government. I mean, the PIP problem is going to affect many people with long-term illnesses.
But Martin, they've seen, Labour MPs have seen them U-turn on winter fuel, so now they think we'll make them U-turn on the person independent.
Of course, you want deeper cuts to welfare, so more disabled people would be hurt. But where he will hit the wall time after time is when you get the individual cases of the people who are going to lose out. Whether it's £30 a week or £180 a week, you discover their disabilities, physical and mental, emotional, and you put faces and names and stories. Because you can talk about, let's save £5 billion, that's fine, But who are you saving it from?
I want to talk about a very interesting issue that's going to be happening in Parliament today. Today, the Reform UK Deputy Leader is going to present something called Lucy's Bill to Parliament. Now, this is something that he proposes. So it's Richard Tyson. He's coming into the programme, actually, this morning to talk about this. It would allow the public to mount a mass appeal against a jail sentence that they judge to be too severe. And this is, of course, because of the case of Lucy Connolly. She is in prison because of a tweet that she sent during the Southport riots in the wake of that awful, awful case of the murder of those 3 lovely girls in Southport. And the tweet was judged to be incitement to violence. And she was given 31 months in prison. He's been to visit her in prison. And he and a number of other people, I think Boris Johnson, Kemi Badenoch, think it's too severe. And so he wants to bring in this bill, which would mean that campaigners would get 500 people at least to physically sign a petition against the punishment, and then it would be considered by the Independent Criminal Cases Review Commission, and then it could be referred to the Court of Appeal.
500 signatures, that's all?
Yeah.
You need 100,000 to have a chance of having a bill debated in
the
Parliament.
Commons,
Well, I would have thought Kenny Noy, a double killer. He was only convicted of one. Remember the Brinks-Matt job? I would have thought he'd probably be able to get 500 villains in South London to
appeal his sentence.
I think Lucy Connolly's sentence was too severe, too draconian. I don't see why a mother, she's a young mother, she's got a young child, should spend 31 months in prison for a revolting, regrettable tweet, which she did take down. But there's been an appeal, and she lost.
She pleaded guilty to inciting racial...
Well, she was persuaded to plead guilty because they said she'd have a lower sentence. That often happens.
Of all the free speech issues, I don't think it's one who says burn down hotels and effectively kill people. I don't think that's the one you should go for. There are cases where I think people are harshly treated. We can discuss the length of the sentence, but she pleaded guilty to inciting racial violence, saying burn down hotels, people in it, you'd kill them, at a time when the people were rioting in the country. And when she was picked up on this, we'll just call it picked up, she deleted it, and then all the messages, because she did lose her appeal, and you saw, I'm going to play the mental health card, all a bit of a laugh it was. Look, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime.
Andrew, it's being used, I would say, as the headline for what's being called two-tier justice. Why has this idea got hold of people so strongly, so powerfully, do you think?
Well, I think it's because she's a mum. She'd never had committed a criminal offence before. She did this in the heat of the moment. Lots of people did reckless things on social media in the heat of the moment. She did take it down. And I think the cold light of day, she realised what she said was deeply offensive and racist. She wasn't really urging people to burn down hotels. She was just deeply frustrated.
She was
Hang on, Kevin. There were terrible rumours sweeping the area that the perpetrator of the Southport killings was an illegal immigrant, which had all been stoked up on. Yeah, Kevin, I know it was all on social media. So she'd fallen for the lie, and I think
Is it also the case that people, you know, and when you haven't seen the facts of cases, I think this is part of the problem with the argument of two-tier justice, is that judges see the facts of the case in a legal court and they have sentencing guidelines, whereas everybody else reads about it in the papers. And the papers do not necessarily report all the details and facts of a case. But what people also see is that other people who seem to have committed dreadful crimes and actively been involved in awfulness do not get
such a severe sentence.
Such a strong sentence.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of criticism that the marches, for instance, in favour of Palestine at the weekend, there's been lots of anti-Semitic behaviour at those marches, and the police turn a blind eye.
But if somebody was convicted in one of those marches, or perhaps one of the Just Stop Oil protesters, presumably they could also get 500 signatures
I would have thought,
in order to spring their protester from prison.
I don't think he's thought this through because he's jumped on a bandwagon. I think he's on the wrong bandwagon.
I mean, to be fair, it's a 10-minute rule bill. It's not something that's going to become law. So this is a totem to make a statement. If we change
except the polling shows that Reform are likely to become the next government.
But if we
so is this indicating something that they would bring in?
If we ignore the 500 and say it's a much bigger number, the principle of the public getting involved in court cases to be able to make sure that there is a miscarriage of justice, is that something you support?
No, well, the public's involved now. If you go to Crown Court and juries, tried by your peers.
It's a random selection.
But I think I'm not into mob justice of somebody who might be very powerful, might be a gangster, really hardened, violent criminal, can just get 500 people to coerce them. Or 500 baddies, and then you get it reviewed.
And the thing is, they won't. It could be a very complicated case, for instance. Let's think about Lucy Letby. Would we apply it to the Lucy Letby case, which was a trial that went on for 10 or 11, 12 months? And what we're really saying, 500 people or 5,000 we can have that appeal looked at again? They won't know the detail. They won't have studied the detail.
That's interesting. Well, why don't we ask the viewers if it's something that they...
I mean, you can have a gut and visceral instinct. This doesn't seem right, and I don't think it does seem right what happened to that woman. But I'm not sure 500 people should.
Your issue is about the length of the sentence, though, isn't it, as opposed to whether that she was convicted?
Yeah, it was length of sentence.
Well, if she pleads guilty, then she's going to be convicted.
Yeah, she lost her appeal on the length of the sentence, didn't she?
Yes. It's interesting because Richard Tice says the British public's gut instinct should count when reviewing criminal cases.
Just get a big crowd of people guilty or not guilty, thumbs up, thumbs down. Let's do that. Let's not bother with all the evidence and
bring back Claudius.
Sounds a little bit gladiatorial, doesn't it?
Let's not have the prosecution. Let's not have the defence, and then people.
Right. Well, we will talk to Richard Tice about that in about an hour's time.